I never meant for the lie to go this far. It started as a whisper, a trembling breath in the quiet of my bedroom, where the walls had long learned to absorb my disappointments. Maybe if they think I'm sick, they'll finally see me. That thought crawled into my mind like an unwelcome guest, but it sat there, heavy, stubborn, impossible to shake. For years, I had watched my family whirl around each other like planets, bright and warm, while I drifted further into the coldness of their shadows. Birthdays forgotten, promises broken, dinners filled with silences that felt sharper than knives. I told myself I was being dramatic, that every mother eventually fades into the background, but deep down, I sensed something darker, not just neglect, but convenience. They needed me when they needed me, and forgot me when they didn't. The day I decided to pretend I was sick, the sky outside was gray enough to feel like an omen. I sat at the dining table, hands shaking just enough to look believable. "I haven't been feeling well," I murmured, expecting concern, maybe even panic. Instead, my daughter looked up from her phone long enough to ask, "Is it serious?" In a tone that suggested she hoped it wasn't, not because she cared, but because seriousness meant responsibility. My son didn't look up at all. And my husband, his fork clattered a bit, but he said nothing. His silence was the kind I had grown used to: polite, dismissive, conditional. I went to bed early that night, rehearsing coughs, staggered breaths, a limp to my walk. Not too dramatic, just enough. I thought foolishly that my sickness would pull them back to me, stitch together the seams of our unraveling bond. But the next morning, something in the air felt off. My daughter was whispering in the hallway. My husband was on the phone, speaking in the low, clipped tone he used only when discussing money or secrets. When I stepped into the kitchen, they quieted instantly. Eyes flicked toward me, then away, like I was an unpleasant truth they weren't ready to face. That was the moment I realized they weren't worried. They were planning, and whatever they were planning, it wasn't meant to save me. The shift was subtle at first, like the slow change in weather before a storm. They weren't kinder, they weren't gentler. Instead, they were alert, watchful, the kind of alertness that comes when someone senses an opportunity they're afraid to lose. My husband hovered near me, not with tenderness, but with the stiff concern of a man calculating something in his head. "Maybe you should rest more," he said. Not "how are you feeling?" Not "should we see a doctor?" Just rest, the kind of vague suggestion that implied he wanted me tucked away somewhere, silent and out of the way. My children behaved the same. Every curious glance they cast at me felt eerily rehearsed, too measured, too controlled. I started to wonder whether they believed my lie at all, or whether they believed it too quickly. One evening, while I lay in bed pretending to be asleep, I heard them talking. Not whispering, talking, openly, as though I were already gone. "Do we know what she has?" my daughter asked, her voice lowered but not enough to conceal the excitement beneath it. "Not yet," my husband answered. "She's weak though, you've seen it. And she's getting older, these things happen." My son exhaled sharply. "So what does that mean for the house? Did she ever update the will?" My heart crawled into my throat and lodged there, choking me with its weight. I gripped the blanket to keep from gasping. The will. I had one, yes, old, untouched, made when love still felt like something permanent. "Don't worry," my husband said in a tone that chilled me. "I'll handle it. She trusts me." They didn't sound worried about losing me. They sounded worried about losing assets. A strange numbness washed over me, equal parts grief and clarity. I had pretended to be sick to see who would hold my hand. Instead, I saw who would let it go first. That night, after they went to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room, the shadows long and unforgiving. I realized that sometimes lies reveal truths more brutal than honesty ever could. My family wasn't afraid of my illness. They were waiting for it, counting on it, preparing for a world where I was silent and they were free. The next morning, I made my steps slower, my breaths heavier, and they watched me the way farmers watch the sky before harvest, waiting, measuring. My husband brought me tea, placing the cup on the table with the same care someone uses when handling something fragile but replaceable. "You should stay home today," he said. "Don't push yourself." It wasn't concern. It was containment. My daughter offered to do the groceries so I could rest. My son insisted he'd handle the bills that week. All these sudden gestures of help, but not one of them looked me in the eyes. They were watching my body, not my pain, evaluating, not comforting. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't supposed to answer in my condition, but curiosity tugged at me. I shuffled quietly to the hallway. Through the cracked door of my bedroom, I heard the murmur of unfamiliar voices. A man, a woman, professional, cold. I crept closer. "Power of attorney," the woman said. "It will allow you to make decisions on her behalf if her health continues to decline." My breath froze. Power of attorney, already? "And the property?" my daughter asked, the question slipping out too quickly. "That can be transferred later," the man replied. "But this documentation gives your husband full decision-making rights. It's simpler if she signs now, before her condition worsens." My condition. The one I invented. The one they were now weaponizing. My knees buckled and I pressed myself against the wall to keep from collapsing with the shock of it. They weren't just waiting, they were accelerating the process. When I stepped into the living room, all conversations stopped. 4 pairs of eyes widened not with guilt but with irritation. I had interrupted their plans. "What is going on?" I asked, letting my voice tremble. My husband inhaled sharply, preparing a speech that was too ready, too rehearsed. "Honey," he began, "we're just trying to help. These are precautionary papers, nothing more, for your safety." "For my safety?" I echoed. They all nodded like synchronized puppets. In that moment, I understood something horrifying. They didn't believe I was dying. They wanted to make sure that when I did, or when they made decisions as though I already had, everything would fall neatly into their hands. My lie had opened a door. Their reactions revealed the monsters standing on the other side. I stared at the documents laid across the table, neat, clinical sheets that could erase a lifetime in a single signature. The woman from the agency adjusted her glasses, clearly impatient. My daughter tapped her nails on the table. My son avoided my eyes, pretending to be interested in a speck on the floor. My husband smiled the way a man smiles when he believes he has already won. "Just sign here," he said softly, pointing to the first line. "It's standard." Standard. The word tasted like poison. My hands shook, not theatrically this time, not as part of the lie, but from a truth that crumbled something inside me. The people I had fed, raised, protected, forgiven, were circling like vultures over a body they believed was too weak to resist. Something shifted in me then. A quietness. A cold, steady awareness. If they wanted a sick woman, I would give them one, but not the one they expected. Slowly, I lowered myself into the chair, letting my breath grow shallow. They leaned in. Eager. Hungry. "I'll sign," I whispered. Relief washed over their faces too quickly. "But first," I said, lifting my eyes to meet each of theirs one by one, "I want to know exactly what you think is happening to me." A flicker of panic, a glance exchanged. My daughter was the first to recover. "Mom, we just want to make sure everything is handled. We don't want stress to make you worse." "Worse," I repeated. "Worse from what?" No one spoke. The woman from the agency cleared her throat. "Your family said you've been diagnosed with a degenerative condition. Time-sensitive. A diagnosis, a degenerative condition. My family had invented a bigger lie than mine. My chest hollowed out. I looked at them, really looked, and saw strangers wearing familiar faces. Saw betrayal wrapped in concern. Saw desperation disguised as love. I pushed the papers back. "I didn't agree to this," I said quietly. My husband's jaw tightened. "Don't make this difficult." Difficult? The word snapped something in me. A mother is allowed many roles: nurturer, protector, forgiver, but they had forgotten one. A woman who has had enough. I stood slowly. "No more today," I said. And for the first time, they couldn't hide their fear that the woman they planned to control might not be as weak as they wanted her to be. That night, the house felt different, thick with unspoken resentment, heavy with the weight of plans interrupted. I could hear them through the thin walls, discussing me as though I were an obstacle instead of a human being. My daughter insisted I was being dramatic. My son complained that this would have been easier if she had just signed. And my husband, he said nothing, but silence speaks louder when it comes from someone who has already decided you're no longer useful. When I closed my bedroom door, something fragile inside me broke, not my spirit, but the last piece of denial. I had spent years convincing myself that my family still loved me, even if they didn't show it the way they used to. That neglect was not the same as cruelty. That blood mattered. But tonight, even shadows avoided comforting lies. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the truth seep in. I had pretended to be sick to test their love. They had responded by trying to bury me alive in paperwork. But grief has a strange way of sharpening the mind. And as tears dried on my cheeks, a different kind of clarity dawned, cool, methodical, deliberate. If they wanted to treat me like someone dying, I would take control of what happened before death. And if they wanted my signature so desperately, I would decide how and when they got anything attached to it. I opened my old wooden chest at the foot of the bed. Inside were documents they had forgotten existed. My original will, letters, bank information, the deed to the house under my name alone. They thought they held all the cards, but they had no idea how much I had kept private. I spent hours reading, sorting, planning. By dawn, I knew exactly what I had to do. Before the sun rose fully, I dressed quietly, grabbed my bag, and slipped out of the house like a ghost escaping its grave. I walked to the bus stop, weakly, deliberately, like the sick woman they expected, but inside I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. I wasn't running away. I was stepping out of the role they had written for me. Let them think I was deteriorating. The truth was far more dangerous for them. I was waking up. The bus ride felt surreal, as though I were floating between two versions of myself: the woman my family believed they could manipulate, and the woman I was finally allowing myself to become. The windows rattled softly, the early morning fog smudging the world beyond into watercolor silhouettes. For the first time in years, no one was calling my name, asking for something, expecting something. I was invisible, and invisibility, I realized, was not always a curse. Sometimes it was freedom. I headed to the one place I knew I could think clearly: the little park by the river, where the benches always stayed cold and the ducks waddled in crooked lines without caring who watched. I sat down, clutching the folder of documents in my lap. My breath clouded in the air, steady and controlled, the breath of someone very much alive. As the sun rose, I replayed every word I had overheard, every look they had exchanged, every lie they had confidently told the woman from the agency. They had painted me as deteriorating, confused, incapable. The realization stung, but beneath the sting was something more powerful: resolve. I needed to update my will. I needed to protect the house. I needed to ensure that the people who were willing to plan my erasure would never profit from my existence. But before any of that, I needed an ally, someone outside the tangled roots of my family tree. Someone who understood the law, but more importantly, understood betrayal. I scrolled through my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I found the contact I hadn't used in years: Marion, my old friend from work, now an estate attorney. We had drifted apart after I married, not because of conflict, but because my husband preferred me isolated. A quiet wife was easier to control. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm, familiar, and laced with surprise. "Is everything all right?" For the first time in days, I felt safe enough to tell the truth, not the lie I'd told my family, but the truth they had forced me to confront. "No," I said, "and I need your help." As I spoke, I could almost feel my old life cracking open, not breaking apart, but breaking free. The woman my family thought they could bury was still here. And she wasn't done yet. Marion insisted on meeting immediately. Within an hour, I sat across from her in a cozy cafe that smelled of cinnamon and warm bread. Her hair had gone grayer, her glasses rounder, but her eyes, sharp and perceptive, held the same unspoken wisdom I remembered. "Tell me everything," she said, and I did. Every detail, every whisper, every calculated smile, every piece of proof that love in my house had rotted into something transactional. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from disbelief to anger to something that looked almost like pity, but not for me, for them. "They fabricated a diagnosis," she said slowly. "Yes." "And brought legal agents to your home?" "Yes." "And pressured you to sign a power of attorney without consent?" I nodded. She leaned back, letting out a low whistle. "That's not just unethical, it's predatory. What they're attempting is practically legal theft." I swallowed hard. Hearing it said aloud made the betrayal feel heavier, more real. "But that works in your favor now," she continued, a spark of strategy igniting behind her eyes. "Because you haven't signed anything yet, which means you're still in full control." Control. A word I had not associated with myself for a long time. She pulled out her notepad. "First, we revise your will. Second, we document everything: dates, conversations, their attempts to coerce you. Third, we place protections around your property." She paused, assessing me. "And lastly, you decide how much of your family you still want in your life." That question landed like a stone in my chest. How much did I want them? Did I want them at all? Was blood enough to justify keeping people who had so casually tried to erase me? "I don't know," I whispered. "You don't need to know today," she said gently. "Today, you need safety." As we finalized the first set of legal steps, I felt a strange sensation: not happiness, but relief edged with sorrow. Marion's calm professionalism was a stark contrast to the chaos in my home, a reminder that sanity still existed somewhere. When we finished, she placed her hand over mine. "You did the right thing by leaving." Leaving. The word echoed. I hadn't realized until that moment that I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving the version of myself who tolerated being unloved. By afternoon, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter, but my phone grew heavier with every buzz. Missed calls, voicemails, messages flooding in from my family, not out of worry, but out of fear that their plans were unraveling. The first voicemail was from my daughter. "Mom, where are you? You can't just disappear like this. People are asking questions." Please come home so we can finish the paperwork. So we can help you. Finish the paperwork. The slip was almost comical. The next message came from my son, clipped and impatient. This isn't funny. You need to be here when the agency calls back. Dad is stressed. Come home. Stress, they were stressed. I listened to each message, noting how none of them asked if I was okay. Not one expressed fear for my health or well-being, just insistence, pressure, urgency to resume the plan. Then came my husband's call. I didn't answer, but his voicemail played automatically. Where are you? This stunt is childish. You need to stop making things difficult and come home. We have things to sort out. Stunt, childish, difficult. He hadn't spoken to me like that when we were young, when love was delicate and new, when he still saw me as a partner rather than an obligation. Somewhere along the years, his affection thinned like old fabric, wearing down until only criticism showed through. I deleted all the messages. Marian had reserved a temporary apartment for me through a friend, a quiet space tucked above a florist shop, where the air smelled faintly of roses. It wasn't home, but it was peaceful, and peace had become a rare luxury. I spent the evening reviewing the documents Marian prepared: legal protections, updates to my will, steps to secure the house immediately. She had moved with urgency, as though she understood that delay could cost me everything. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not because I missed them, but because I mourned the illusion I had carried for years. The illusion that my family, despite their flaws, valued me as more than a caretaker, a cook, a background figure. Sometimes the hardest grief is grieving the living, but beneath the sorrow was something steady and rising, a quiet anger with a heartbeat of its own. Because now that I knew the truth, I could never unknow it. 2 days passed before I heard the knock at the door. It was hesitant but persistent, like someone unsure whether they were welcome. I peered through the peephole and felt my breath hitch. It was my daughter. Her makeup was smudged, her hair tied loosely, a rare sight for someone who crafted her appearance like armor. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lock. Part of me wanted to open the door, to believe she had come for the right reasons. Another part knew better. I cracked the door but kept the chain on. "Mom," she breathed, relieved. "Thank God, we've been worried sick." Sick, the irony tasted bitter. "You should have thought of that before trying to force me to sign those papers," I answered. She blinked, taken aback. "It's not what you think, it's exactly what I think." Her composure crumbled, a little desperation leaking through the cracks. "Dad said you misunderstood. We were just trying to protect the family. We thought things were getting worse." I studied her face. The twitching, the forced softness, the way her eyes kept darting to the folder on my table behind me. She wasn't here for reconciliation, she was here for control. "You lied about me having a degenerative illness," I said quietly. "Why?" Her throat bobbed. The agency needed a reason to expedite things." I let that sink in. They hadn't just lied to others. They had lied so convincingly to themselves that they believed expedience justified falsehood. "What were you rushing toward?" I asked. She didn't answer, she didn't have to. "You need to come home," she said instead. "We can fix this. Dad is furious." "I'm not coming home." Her eyes widened like a child being denied a toy she believed belonged to her. "Mom, don't be ridiculous. Everything is yours. You don't need to run." I looked at her, really looked, and saw a woman shaped by entitlement. A woman who saw my life as something she would inherit, not something I was still living. "I'm not running," I said softly. "I'm choosing myself." Her expression hardened. All tenderness vanished. "If you don't come home," she said, "you're going to cause a lot of problems for us." "For you," I corrected. I closed the door gently, even as she began to plead. On the other side, her voice broke, but it wasn't from love. It was from losing grip on something she thought she already owned. After my daughter left, silence filled the apartment like a thick fog. I sank onto the sofa, heart pounding from the confrontation. I had never closed a door on my child before, even metaphorically, let alone physically. But something had shifted inside me. I no longer saw her as a daughter reaching for help, but as a woman reaching for possession. I needed strength, and I knew where I could find it. I walked to the florist downstairs. Mrs. Ellery, the shop owner, had always been a quiet presence in the neighborhood, gentle smile, soft voice, and a wisdom carried in the lines of her weathered hands. When she saw me enter, she looked up with surprise. "You look tired, dear," she said. "Sit." I did, and before I knew it, I was talking not everything, but enough. Enough for her to understand the weight pressing on my chest. She handed me a cup of tea and listened the way only people who have lived long and lost much can listen. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "Family can wound deeper than strangers," she said, "because they know exactly where to pierce." Tears pricked my eyes. "They tried to take everything from me." They didn't succeed, she reminded gently. You walked away before they could. I'm scared, I admitted. They won't stop. She didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned forward, lowering her voice. Then you must stop being the woman they expect. Weakness is a costume, and you've worn it long enough. Now it's time to take it off. Her words were simple, but they cracked something open inside me, a truth I had avoided for too long. My family wasn't afraid of my sickness. They were afraid of my strength. As I walked back upstairs, I felt steadier, grounded. I spent the evening writing memories, reflections, small injustices I had swallowed for years. Marian had asked for documentation, and I realized I had more than I thought. Not just evidence for legal protection, but evidence for myself. Proof that I had been disappearing long before I pretended to be ill. As I wrote, a message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. You can't hide forever. My breath stilled. They weren't done. But neither was I. Fear has a way of sharpening the senses. The moment I read that message, you can't hide forever, my pulse quickened, but my mind grew strangely calm. I stared at the screen, tracing the words, searching for meaning between them. Was it my husband? My son? Someone they recruited? Whoever sent it believed intimidation would drive me back into their arms, back into compliance. They still thought I was the same woman who tiptoed through her own home, trying not to disrupt the fragile peace. But fear, when faced head-on, becomes fuel. I showed Marian the message the next morning. She examined the screen, her expression tightening. This is harassment, she said, and it works in our favor. Save every message, every call, every threat. They're building a case against themselves. Do I respond? I asked. No, she said. Silence is your strength right now. Anything you say becomes ammunition. Let them reveal who they really are. There was a comfort in having someone guide me, someone who didn't see me as fragile or confused. Marian explained the next legal steps, her voice steady and confident. We're going to file for a protective order regarding your property, she said, and we're adding clauses to your estate that restrict access unless certain ethical conditions are met. Ethical conditions? I repeated. She nodded. Proof of care. Proof of responsibility. Proof of genuine involvement in your well-being. If they want anything from you, they must earn it. The irony struck me. After years of giving without expecting anything in return, I was finally drawing boundaries. After the meeting, I walked through the city, letting the hum of traffic and conversation drown out the whispers of my past life. Every step away from my old neighborhood felt like walking out of a fog. I paused at a bridge overlooking the river. The water below moved steadily, confidently, carving its way through stone as though the world had always made space for it. Maybe strength wasn't loud or dramatic. Maybe it was simply choosing not to be erased. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from my husband. Come home, we need to talk. Don't make this more complicated than it has to be. Complicated. The word echoed with the same dismissive tone he had used for years. I didn't reply. I was done bending to protect their comfort. Now they would have to face the discomfort of my absence. That evening, the apartment felt unusually still, a stillness that heightened every sound, every creak of the wooden floor, every whisper of wind against the window pane. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, trying to settle my thoughts when the lights in the apartment flickered once, then again. A subtle, unnerving stutter. My breath caught. Was it just faulty wiring? Or something more deliberate? I moved to the window and peered outside. The street below looked ordinary, a couple chatting by the florist's shop, a delivery driver unloading boxes. But when I shifted my gaze to the sidewalk across the street, my pulse quickened. My husband's car, parked, silent, engine off, but unmistakable. He wasn't knocking on my door. He wasn't calling. He was watching. A cold chill crawled up my spine, not because I feared him, but because I finally saw him clearly. The man who once held my hand during thunderstorms was gone. In his place stood someone who preferred control over companionship, dominance over dialogue. I closed the blinds slowly. A knock came moments later, not loud, not aggressive, just patient, too patient. I didn't move. Another knock. Then his voice, muffled but unmistakable. Open the door, we need to talk. I remained silent. Don't be dramatic, he said. You're overreacting. This is family business. Family business, the phrase manipulators used to keep victims silent. When I didn't respond, the knocking stopped. I waited, breath tight in my chest, listening for footsteps, a door slam, retreat, but there was nothing, just silence. Minutes stretched into an hour. I checked the window again. His car was gone. Relief washed through me until I noticed the envelope taped to my door. I removed it cautiously and opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No explanation, just 6 words. "You're going to regret this, Anna." They weren't planning for my care anymore. They were planning for my compliance. I folded the note carefully, not out of sentiment, but out of anticipation. This, too, was evidence. Proof that the family I once nurtured would rather threaten me than accept my autonomy. In that moment, fear did not control me. Resolve did. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my mind already sorting through possibilities, contingencies, strategies. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was preparing. I gathered the threatening note, the messages, everything that could build a pattern. Marian's legal assistant met me at her office early, her face tightening when she saw the envelope. "This escalates the case," she said. "It's good you didn't confront him." Good. For once, doing nothing was the strong choice. Marian arrived with coffee and several folders in hand. She studied the note quietly, then placed it into a labeled file. "This confirms intent," she said. "Coercion, intimidation, possibly even extortion." A strange sensation filled me, a blend of vindication and sorrow. I had once believed my husband incapable of such cruelty. Yet here we were, labeling his actions with words reserved for criminals. "We'll file a formal complaint," Marian continued. "And this gives us leverage for an emergency injunction." "Injunction?" I asked. "Preventing him from contacting you, approaching you, or accessing any of your assets while the investigation is ongoing." She paused. "Anna, this is serious now. You need to understand that following through means protecting yourself legally, emotionally, and financially." I nodded. "I understand." She studied me a moment longer, then softened. "You're handling this with remarkable strength." Strength. It still felt foreign to hear it spoken about me. After the paperwork, I went for a walk. The city felt different today, sharper, clearer. I noticed the way people moved, the way they carried their own burdens, the way life continued regardless of my unraveling. It humbled me, but it also reminded me that my story wasn't over. It was merely shifting. As I passed a bookstore, I caught my reflection in the window. My eyes looked tired but determined. My posture, once slouched with years of quiet resignation, stood straighter now. I barely recognized the woman looking back, and I realized something profound. Maybe I hadn't lost myself. Maybe I had simply been buried. A vibration buzzed in my pocket, another message. This time from an unknown number. "You can run to lawyers, but you can't outrun blood." A threat disguised as philosophy. I forwarded it directly to Marian. Then I deleted it from my phone, not out of fear, but because fear no longer dictated my actions. 2 days later, something unexpected happened, something that unraveled a truth I hadn't even considered. Marian called me to her office urgently. Her tone was calm, but rushed. "It's important. Come as soon as you can." When I arrived, she closed the door behind me and gestured to a chair. "I've been reviewing some public records tied to your property," she began, "and I found something concerning." Concerning. That one word sent a ripple of unease through my chest. She opened a file and slid a document toward me. "Last year, your husband attempted to refinance the house." I frowned. "Without my consent?" "Exactly." She tapped the paper. "He listed himself as the primary owner." "But the deed is in my name alone," I said. "It is," she confirmed, "which means he either forged your consent or he planned to." A cold, electric chill crawled over my skin. I stared at the document, my mind replaying moments I had dismissed, unexplained meetings, hushed phone calls, his mood swings whenever money was mentioned. "How far back does this go?" I asked quietly. Marian hesitated, then pulled out another folder. "Farther than we expected." She placed it in front of me. "There were attempts to access your savings account, small withdrawals, discreet, over several years." My breath faltered. "He stole from me?" "Legally, possibly. Ethically," she sighed. "Absolutely." Suddenly, the lies I had told pretending to be sick seemed pale in comparison to the lies that had been told to me. My marriage, my home, my trust, all quietly siphoned like water through cracks I never noticed. "He wasn't waiting for you to get sick," Marian said, her voice gentle but firm. "He's been preparing for your dependency, for years." My stomach twisted, not from heartbreak that had already happened. This was something else. Recognition. He hadn't changed. He had revealed himself, and the revelation was nauseating. "What do I do now?" I whispered. Marian folded her hands. "You fight, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. You've spent years shrinking to avoid conflict. Now it's time to stand so tall they can't reach the top of your shadow." I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not fear, awakening. He thought I was weakened. He thought my lie proved my fragility, but all it did was expose his. That evening, I returned to the apartment feeling like the world had tilted slightly off its axis. I had known my marriage was fractured, but never imagined the cracks were so deep or so deliberate. The apartment's warm glow didn't comfort me this time. It illuminated everything I had lost to years of silence, my confidence, my curiosity, my sense of self. But it also illuminated everything I had reclaimed. I brewed tea and sat by the window, watching the florist below close her shop. The streetlights flickered on, casting soft halos across the pavement. It struck me how peaceful the world seemed, a peace I had never truly experienced in my own home. As I sipped my tea, I opened a notebook and began writing. Not evidence this time, not timelines or legal notes. Something different. Memories. The good ones, the painful ones, the ones I had buried under responsibilities and guilt. I wrote about my daughter's first laugh, my son's first heartbreak, the early years of my marriage when tenderness still existed. I wrote until my hand ached. And somewhere between the sentences, I realized I wasn't writing to remember them. I was writing to remember me. My phone buzzed again, but this time from a number I recognized. A number that made my heart pinch unexpectedly. My sister. We hadn't spoken in almost a decade. Not because of conflict, but because my husband preferred isolation. The quieter I was, the easier I was to control. I answered hesitantly. Anna, her voice trembled. Is it true? Are you sick? I closed my eyes, my own lie coming back like a boomerang. No, I said softly, I'm not sick. Then why is your husband telling everyone you're unwell? He called me yesterday, said he needed family support because you're deteriorating. My breath halted. He was spreading the lie outward. Not to help me, but to build a narrative, to paint me as unstable, confused, incapable, a woman whose legal decisions could be questioned. Anna, my sister whispered. What's happening? I steadied my voice. I need to tell you the truth, all of it. And as I spoke, revealing the betrayal, the forged documents, the threats, something in her voice shifted. Not pity, not shock, anger, protective, fierce anger. Tell me what you need, she said. I'm with you. For the first time in years. I wasn't alone. My sister arrived the next morning, her presence filling the apartment with a warmth I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. She embraced me tightly, her arms trembling with the weight of years we had both lost to distance created not by time or geography, but by manipulation. When we finally pulled apart, her eyes were sharp with fury. He told me you were confused, she said. Said you'd been forgetting things, losing track of days. He made you sound like a ghost of yourself. My stomach twisted. He's building a narrative. He's building a case, she corrected. One that makes you look incompetent. The air between us thickened with the truth. My husband hadn't merely reacted to my lie, he had been waiting for an opportunity like this. An opportunity to diminish my voice, then inherit the silence. We sat together on the couch, and I shared everything. The papers he tried to force on me, the agency visit, the forged refinancing attempt, the threats. Her silence was not disbelief. It was rage simmering beneath the surface. You're coming with me, she said firmly. You're not staying here alone. I'm safe here, I insisted. Legally protected. She shook her head. Safe, he found this address once. He can find it again. And after everything you've told me. I don't trust him not to try something worse. The fear I had managed to tame flickered again, sharp and familiar. What if leaving makes things more dangerous? What if staying does? She countered. Her words echoed in my chest. For years, I had chosen the path of least resistance, believing endurance equaled strength. But endurance had cost me so much: relationships, confidence, autonomy. Maybe strength wasn't enduring. Maybe it was escaping. We packed a small bag. As I looked around the apartment one last time, a strange sadness washed over me. This place had given me refuge, clarity, freedom, but it was only a stepping stone. My sister's car smelled of peppermint and old memories. As we pulled away, I watched the building shrink in the rearview mirror. It felt like shedding an old skin, painful, fragile, but necessary. On the road, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. I pressed play. My husband's voice slithered through the speaker. Running won't change the outcome, Anna. You belong at home, and you're coming back. My sister's knuckles whitened on the wheel. I exhaled slowly, the fear inside me shifting into something colder. No, I whispered. I'm not. We arrived at my sister's house, a place I hadn't visited in nearly 8 years. It sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, bathed in golden afternoon light. Children played in nearby yards, their laughter echoing faintly, a reminder that life, in all its simplicity, continued even when mine felt unbearably complex. Inside, her home was warm and lived in. Photos lined the walls: weddings, birthdays, vacations. My absence in those frames stung, but I couldn't blame her. She had invited me countless times. I was the one who always declined, conditioned to believe that stepping outside my husband's orbit was disloyal, disruptive, dangerous. Now I saw that obedience for what it truly was, conditioning. She led me to a guest room with soft blue walls and fresh linens. "You'll sleep here," she said. "No arguments." I didn't argue. The bed looked like safety. As I unpacked, she sat beside me. "I need to ask," she said gently. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why live through all of that alone?" The answer lodged in my throat. "Shame, habit, fear. I didn't know how bad it was," I finally said. "When you're living inside a storm, you forget what calm feels like." She took my hand. "Well, you're out now, and you're not going back." But the world outside had its own storms brewing. That evening, as we prepared dinner together like we used to, my sister's doorbell rang. She frowned. "I'm not expecting anyone." My heart stuttered. She motioned for me to stay put and walked to the door. I could hear muffled voices, hers tense, the other unmistakably smooth, rehearsed. "My husband." My breath froze. "What are you doing here?" my sister snapped. "I came for my wife," he said. "Where is she?" "She doesn't want to see you." "She's confused," he insisted. "She doesn't understand what she's doing." I stepped into the hallway, my legs trembling but determined. "I understand perfectly," I said. His head snapped toward me. His smile was thin, brittle. "Anna, come home, let's talk privately. This family drama is unnecessary." My sister stepped between us. "You need to leave." He ignored her. His eyes locked onto mine, soft on the surface, seething beneath. "You can't run from your own family," he said quietly. "I'm not running," I replied. "I'm choosing." His expression fractured shock, anger, disbelief. And for the first time, I didn't look away. My husband's composure cracked, just slightly, but enough for me to see the truth beneath his mask. He wasn't here out of love or concern, he was here because control was slipping through his fingers. And he wasn't accustomed to losing anything. "Anna," he said, lowering his voice as though I were a fragile child, "you're acting irrationally. All this talk of lawyers and paperwork, it's not like you. You're being influenced." By influence, he meant freedom. My sister folded her arms. "She's not signing anything, and she's not going anywhere with you." His jaw tightened. "This is between a husband and wife." "No," I said firmly. "This is between someone who wanted to erase me and someone who finally refuses to disappear." His eyes darkened. "Erase you? I've cared for you all these years." "You've managed me," I corrected. "Controlled me, made decisions for me, isolated me." He scoffed. "You're imagining things." "Then why did you tell people I was losing my memory?" I asked. "Why did you file paperwork behind my back? Why did you threaten me?" For the first time, he faltered. Just a flicker. But I saw it, the realization that his facade had cracked beyond repair. "You're sick," he insisted. "You don't know what you're saying." My sister stepped forward. "She's not sick, and you need to leave before I call the police." A tense silence stretched between us like a pulled wire. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "This isn't over," he said, turning toward the door. "You're making a mistake you'll regret." He stepped outside, but before my sister could close the door, he paused and looked back at me. "You think they can protect you?" he said softly. "Family doesn't protect you from consequences." Then he was gone. My legs nearly buckled, but my sister caught me. "You were incredible," she whispered. "You stood your ground." But I didn't feel incredible. I felt hollow, shaken, trembling from the magnitude of what had just happened. Standing up to him was like facing a storm without shelter, terrifying, disorienting, overwhelming. Yet beneath the fear was something new. Pride. I had spoken truths I once believed were too dangerous to voice. And though his threats lingered like storm clouds, something inside me had shifted permanently. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like his. I felt like mine. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay awake listening to the quiet house, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of settling wood, the distant bark of a neighborhood dog, normal sounds, safe sounds. But my mind was anything but calm. Every shadow felt like a memory, every memory felt like a warning. My sister, sensing my restlessness, knocked softly on the door. "You're awake," she said, not asking but knowing. I nodded. "He won't stop." "No," she agreed, "but neither will we." She sat beside me, her presence grounding. "Do you remember," she said, "when we were young and you wanted to be a writer, you filled notebooks with stories?" I smiled faintly. "I barely remember that girl." "She's still there," she said gently. "You've just spent years being told she shouldn't matter." Her words felt like a balm on an old wound, soothing, yet painful in their truth. "He's going to escalate," I whispered. "I know him, he doesn't accept defeat." "Then don't give him a victory to chase," she said. "Don't play his game, play yours." Simple words, powerful ones. The next morning, Marian called with news. "Anna, the injunction is progressing faster than expected. The evidence you've given us is strong. The threats, the forged documents, the fabricated illness, it's more than enough. Relief washed over me like warm water. And there's more, she continued. We've contacted the agency that visited your home. They've launched an internal investigation. The representatives were misled, and if they cooperate, it will be damning for him. My heart raced, not with fear, but with an unfamiliar sensation, vindication. After the call, I went to the backyard, breathing in the crisp morning air. Birds chirped overhead, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding in human lives below. For a moment, I let myself feel the sun on my face. I wasn't a prisoner anymore, but freedom doesn't erase trauma. It merely illuminates it. As I stood in the sunlight, I realized something profound. Healing wasn't the absence of fear. Healing was choosing not to be ruled by it. I walked back inside with steadier steps. Whatever storm was coming, I was learning how to stand in the rain. My sister insisted we keep the doors locked and the curtains drawn for the next few days. It felt strange, hiding, yet no longer feeling hidden. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had lived in a house where my voice had been invisible, my wishes overlooked, my autonomy dismissed. Now, in this temporary refuge, I felt seen. I spent the morning reading through the revised will Marian had drafted. Each clause was clear, firm, protective. No one could claim authority over my life again without explicit consent. The house would not be touched, my assets would be shielded, and any inheritance required demonstrated respect and responsibility, not bloodline entitlement. With every line I read, the chains I hadn't realized I was wearing loosened. My sister joined me at the table with 2 cups of coffee. You look different, she said. Lighter. I feel different, I admitted. You should, she replied. You're finally living for yourself. I wanted to believe that healing was linear, step by step toward a brighter future. But healing, I realized, was jagged. It came in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes crashing. And that afternoon, the waves crashed. My phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. A woman's voice spoke on the other end, timid, uncertain. Mrs. Hale, this is Jenna. I'm the representative from the agency who visited your home last week. My heart tightened. Yes, I remember. Her voice wavered. I shouldn't be calling you directly, but I needed to. I reviewed the notes from our visit and something didn't feel right, so I looked deeper. I gripped the phone. What did you find? There was a pause, the kind that held its breath. Your husband didn't just imply you were sick, she said softly. He claimed you had been diagnosed with early-stage cognitive decline. He said you were paranoid, confused, and emotionally unstable. My breath caught painfully. He warned us, she continued, that you might lash out, that you might lie, that you might run. The room spun slightly, not because I was shocked, but because I was. He wanted us to believe you were incapable, she said, and I think he did it so no one would question anything he asked us to process. I closed my eyes. My lie had revealed their truth, and their truth was far darker than I had ever imagined. Jenna's voice trembled as she spoke, each word peeling back another layer of the reality I had tried so long to deny. We're trained to identify inconsistencies, she said, and your husband, he seemed too prepared. Too precise, almost rehearsed. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. What does that mean for your agency? I asked. It means, she answered softly, that we've opened a formal investigation. We contacted the physician he claimed diagnosed you. There is no such record. No appointment. No file under your name. I pressed a hand to my forehead. He fabricated medical documents? I can't say that officially, she replied, but it's clear he supplied information with intent to mislead. She hesitated. Mrs. Hale, I've worked in this field for 12 years. I've seen families desperate, frightened, confused, but I've never seen someone orchestrate something like this with such confidence. Her words hit harder than any threat my husband had made. Confidence. Because he had believed no one would question him, because he had spent years molding me into someone who didn't question him either. Jenna exhaled shakily. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize something was wrong. You realized, I whispered. That's what matters. Before hanging up, she added, if you need a witness statement, your lawyer can contact me. I won't stay silent. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet kitchen, the taste of bitterness and relief mingling on my tongue. My sister walked in, noticing my expression instantly. What happened? I relayed the conversation. With each detail, her eyes grew wider, sharper, blazing with protective fury. He tried to medically discredit you, she said. That's not just manipulation, that's calculated annihilation. I swallowed hard. He didn't want a wife, he wanted a dependent. Because dependents don't fight back, she murmured, but I was fighting now. That evening, Marian came over to discuss Jenna's testimony. She listened carefully, nodding as the pieces clicked into place. "This strengthens our case," she said. "It proves intent to undermine your autonomy for personal gain." The room fell quiet. "Anna," she added gently, "you need to understand how dangerous this was. If he had succeeded in establishing that narrative, you could have lost everything: your home, your finances, your legal independence." "My life," I whispered. She didn't deny it. In that moment, fear didn't wash over me. Determination did. He had built an entire framework to erase me. Now I would dismantle it piece by piece. Days passed, but I no longer moved through them as a ghost. The world felt clearer, sharper, not because it was safe, but because I finally understood the dangers I had lived with for so long. My sister stayed by my side, a quiet anchor in the chaos. Marion continued filing motions and gathering evidence. Even Jenna's agency reached out, offering to provide documentation of my husband's false claims. Piece by piece, the truth was taking shape, a truth he could no longer twist. Yet despite the momentum, a heaviness lingered. I wasn't afraid of him showing up. I wasn't afraid of losing my home. I wasn't afraid of legal battles. I was afraid of the grief. The grief of realizing the life I thought I had built was nothing more than a carefully curated illusion. That the man I had shared a home with for decades had spent years preparing for my silence. That the children I had raised with love had aligned themselves with him not out of loyalty, but out of expectation. Grief, I was learning, was not always loud. Sometimes it was a quiet ache that rested behind the ribs, persistent, suffocating, tender. One afternoon, while my sister napped on the couch, I stepped outside into her garden. The air smelled of lavender and wet soil. Birds hopped along the fence, unbothered by human turmoil. I knelt beside a row of wilted plants and began pulling weeds, a small, grounding task that required nothing but presence. As I worked, I felt the weight of everything pressing against me: betrayal, exhaustion, fear, but also strength, stubbornness, awakening. My phone buzzed, a text from my daughter. "Mom, we need to talk, please." No manipulation, no demands, no threats, just please. I stared at the message, my heart tightening. Was this genuine remorse, desperation, another tactic? My fingers hovered over the screen before I locked the phone and slid it back into my pocket. I wasn't ready. Not because I was afraid of her, but because I was finally prioritizing myself, my healing, my clarity. The garden breeze brushed my cheek gently, like a small encouragement. For the first time in years, I allowed myself the one thing I had always denied: time. Time to think. Time to breathe. Time to become someone who didn't rush back into the arms of harm. That evening, my sister prepared dinner, filling the house with the aroma of roasted herbs and lemon. As we ate, there was a quiet between us, not uncomfortable, but reflective. She finally spoke. "You don't owe your children anything right now," she said gently. I sighed. "They're still my children." "They're adults," she corrected. "Adults who made choices. Adults who betrayed you. Being your child does not exempt them from accountability." Her words settled heavily but truthfully. Later that night, I sat in the guest room and opened my daughter's message again. Please, it was such a small word. Yet it carried years of history, moments of closeness, arguments, misunderstandings, love, distance. I typed a response, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted it again. I didn't know what to say, not yet. My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. My sister stepped in holding an old wooden box. "I found this in my attic," she said. "It belonged to Mom." I opened it slowly. Inside were photographs, faded, worn, familiar, my parents, my sister and I as children, family gatherings, laughter frozen in time, and then a picture I hadn't seen in decades, me at 23 standing in front of my tiny first apartment, holding a journal against my chest, smiling like the world belonged to me. "You were happy," my sister said softly. "I was hopeful," I corrected. "You still can be." Her certainty pierced something fragile inside me. As she left the room, I held the photograph against my heart. It felt like reconnecting with a version of myself I had abandoned long ago, a woman who wrote stories, who dreamed of travel, who believed in futures instead of merely enduring the present. I realized my husband had not taken that woman from me. I had buried her to survive, but survival was no longer my only goal. I set the photograph on the bedside table, a quiet promise to myself. Tomorrow, I would answer my daughter. Not to reconcile, not to surrender, but to confront the truth, hers and mine. Before sleeping, I whispered into the dim room, "I'm coming back to myself." And for the first time, I believed it. Morning light spilled through the curtains, soft and golden. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, the photograph of my younger self beside me. Strength didn't always feel loud. Sometimes it felt like a quiet inhale before a difficult truth. I opened my daughter's message again. "Mom, we need to talk." Please, this time I typed a response and didn't delete it. What do you want to talk about? I stared at the screen, half expecting no reply, half expecting a barrage of justification. But the answer came quickly. I didn't know Dad was doing all of that. I swear, I didn't know. A small crack opened in my chest, not forgiveness, but something closer to possibility. I replied, "You were there when the agency came. You pushed for the papers. You stayed silent." A pause. "Then I thought it was what you wanted. Dad said you were scared of making decisions. He said you asked him for help." I closed my eyes. The lie he crafted hadn't just fooled strangers. It had fooled the people closest to me, or perhaps they allowed themselves to believe it because belief required less effort than responsibility. I typed, "Did you ever ask me?" A long pause. "No," one word, heavy as stone. "Why?" I sent, another pause. "Because I didn't want to deal with it. Dad said he would handle everything. I trusted him, and I didn't want the burden." There it was, the truth beneath the excuses, not malice, convenience. I took a slow breath and replied, "I am your mother, not a burden." Her next message arrived instantly, as if she had been waiting years to say it. "I'm sorry." Two small words that didn't erase the past, but opened a door. Before I could respond, another text appeared. "Can we meet, just us?" My heart quickened. I wasn't sure if I was ready. I wasn't sure if she was ready, but I knew avoidance would only deepen wounds. I typed, "Yes, tomorrow, public place." She agreed. As I set the phone down, my hands trembled not with fear but with the fragile hope of something mending. Not reconciliation, not yet, but truth. And truth, I was learning, was a beginning. The next day, my sister drove me to a quiet cafe by the lake, neutral territory, open space, witnesses nearby. I chose a table near the window, the sunlight reflecting off the water in shimmering ripples. My daughter arrived 10 minutes later, her shoulders hunched, her eyes swollen as if she hadn't slept. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "Sit," I said gently. She did, her hands fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt fragile, like glass between us. Finally, she said, "I didn't know it would go that far." "Which part?" I asked softly. "The lies, the pressure. The signatures, or the fact that you almost helped them take everything from me?" Her breath hitched. "I thought you were fading. I thought you needed help." "You thought I needed control," I corrected. She looked down. Maybe I didn't want to deal with the responsibility of caring for you. Dad said he had a plan, that he could handle everything. I wanted to believe him." I studied her face, the daughter I raised, the woman I barely recognized. "Did you ever stop to think about what I wanted?" Tears pooled in her eyes. "I didn't think you knew what you wanted anymore." The words hurt because for a long time they were true. "I'm not blameless," I admitted. "I pretended to be sick. I wanted to see if anyone cared." I paused, but what I saw instead was everyone preparing for my absence. Her tears fell freely now. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was selfish and scared, and I didn't want to see you as human, someone who still had needs." I leaned back. "And what about your father?" "You know what he's done?" She swallowed. "More than I wanted to believe." "Do you still trust him?" She shook her head slowly. "No, not anymore." A quiet fell between us again, but this one felt different, not fragile, but open. "What do you need from me now?" she asked. "Honesty," I said. "Respect and space." She nodded. "I can give you that." I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. She froze, then squeezed gently, a small gesture, but enough, not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of something new. After my daughter left, I remained at the cafe for a long time, watching the sunlight shimmer across the lake as if the water itself were breathing. I felt lighter somehow, not healed, not whole, but untethered from a weight I hadn't realized I'd been dragging behind me. My sister joined me after a while, sliding into the chair across from me. "How did it go?" she asked. I exhaled slowly. "Better than I feared, worse than I hoped." She nodded knowingly. That's usually how truth works. We walked along the lakeside path, the wind brushing softly against our jackets. I felt the quiet shift inside me, not peace exactly, but a clarity that felt like stepping into daylight after years in a dim room. "She admitted her part in it," I said, "but she didn't fully understand what your husband was doing," my sister replied. "He taught everyone in that house not to question him." I hadn't thought of it that way, but the truth seemed obvious now. It wasn't only me he had conditioned, it was everyone within reach of his influence. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Marion. Her tone was urgent but controlled. "Anna, we've received notice. Your husband has filed a petition claiming you're mentally unfit to make legal decisions." My chest tightened. "He's still trying to take power of attorney?" "Yes," she said. "He's asserting that your recent actions prove instability." "Recent actions?" I echoed, stunned. "Leaving the house. Seeking legal counsel, refusing to sign documents, he's framing all of it as erratic." My stomach twisted with fury. He's twisting my survival into madness. That's why we need to act quickly, Marion said. We'll request an immediate psychological evaluation from a neutral third party proving your competence. Once that's established, his petition collapses. He's getting desperate, I murmured. That makes him dangerous. Marion's voice softened. You've already regained more than he ever intended you to have, Anna. He's losing control, and men like him don't lose quietly. I hung up and stared at the lake, the calm surface disguising the turbulence beneath. The world around me seemed unchanged, children laughing, birds calling, life continuing, yet my world shifted again. He was escalating, but I was no longer alone, and I was no longer the woman he could silence. The psychological evaluation was scheduled for the following morning. I hardly slept, not because I doubted my sanity, but because the idea of having to prove it felt like swallowing thorns. My sister drove me to the clinic. The building was bright and modern, filled with soft background music and clean lines. The evaluator, Dr. Lorne, greeted me with a warm, steady presence. There was no judgment in his eyes, no suspicion, only quiet curiosity. We sat in his office, sunlight spilling across polished wood. He began gently, asking about my history, my marriage, my children, my emotional state. His questions weren't traps, they were invitations. Invitations to speak openly about things I had never allowed myself to name. I told him about my husband's control, the isolation, the condescension, the perception shaping. How he had convinced the world I was fragile long before I ever pretended to be. How that lie, my lie, had exposed the deeper lies beneath. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I didn't stumble. For the first time in a long time, I spoke as someone who knew exactly what she was saying. At the end, he leaned back and said gently, Anna, you are coherent, rational, articulate, and fully aware of your circumstances. There is no indication of cognitive decline or psychological instability. A wave of relief washed through me so strong I nearly sagged in my seat. He continued, in fact, your insight into your experiences demonstrates resilience. You've endured psychological manipulation. That doesn't make you unfit, it makes you a survivor. Survivor. The word echoed inside me, reshaping something fundamental. When the evaluation was over, I stepped outside with my sister, the sun warming my face. It's done, I whispered. She hugged me tightly. He can't twist this, not anymore. But as we walked toward the car, I noticed something across the parking lot, a familiar figure leaning against a vehicle. My husband. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable, but the tension in his jaw was unmistakable. He had expected the evaluation to go differently. He had expected me to falter, to break, to crumble. Instead, I walked past him, chin lifted, step steady, without a single word. Because I owed him nothing. Not fear, not explanation, not submission, nothing. When we got home, I felt drained not from the evaluation, but from the emotional battle that had taken place over the past weeks. My sister made tea while I sat at the table, staring at the steam swirling upward like a slow unraveling of the past. How long do you think he'll keep fighting? I asked quietly. My sister considered this. Until he realizes the war is over. Wars don't end because one side walks away, I murmured. They end when the losing side runs out of ammunition. Then we make sure he has none left, she said firmly. Later, Marion called. I received the evaluator's report. It's excellent. This gives us the leverage we need. What happens now? I asked. We file a counter-petition asserting deliberate psychological manipulation and attempted financial exploitation. We submit the threats, the fabricated medical claims, the forged financial attempts. Anna, he's not just going to lose this case. He's going to be exposed. I swallowed hard. Exposed. The word felt heavy not for me but for him, for the man who had built an identity on control, perception, and quiet dominance. He won't accept that, I said softly. He won't have a choice, she replied. Just as we ended the call, the doorbell rang. My sister stiffened instantly. We approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, I saw not my husband but my son. A complicated ache tugged inside me. My sister opened the door only a few inches. What do you want? He swallowed, his voice small. I need to talk to Mom. I stepped forward, pushing the door open slightly more. He looked older somehow, not in age but in regret. Mom, he breathed. I'm sorry, I didn't know Dad was doing all of that. I swear I didn't know. I didn't speak, not yet. He continued, desperation creeping into his voice. I thought you were sick. I thought you weren't thinking clearly. Dad said you were confused, that you asked him to handle things. My throat tightened. That lie again. That weapon he used freely. And you never questioned him? I asked. He lowered his eyes. No, I didn't want to believe he was capable of any of this. And now, I pressed. He looked up, eyes glossy. Now I know I failed you, and I want to make it right. I studied him quietly. I had learned something important over the last weeks. Regret is not the same as responsibility. My son stood outside the doorway, hands shoved deep into his pockets, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. The weight of what he had allowed was settling on him, cracking the veneer of certainty he had inherited from his father. I want to help now, he said. Whatever you need. I held his gaze. I don't need rescuing, I said. I needed understanding. I needed compassion. I needed someone to ask me what I wanted, and no one did. I know, he whispered, shame coloring his face. I'm so sorry. The words hung between us, fragile. Do you understand, I asked softly, that what your father did wasn't just controlling, it was dangerous? That he tried to take everything from me, my autonomy, my home, my identity? He nodded. I know, I went through the documents. The agency called me. They asked if I was aware of the diagnosis he reported. He swallowed. I told them I was. They said there was no diagnosis at all. His voice shook. Dad lied to everyone. A silence settled. My sister watched quietly, not intruding but present, sensing the delicate weight of the moment. I believed him, my son said, because it was easier, because taking his side meant I didn't have to face my own responsibilities. And now, I asked. Now I want to be better, he said quietly. If you'll let me. Something inside me softened, not forgiveness, not yet, but a loosening of the hardened place that had formed around my heart. You can't erase what happened, I said. But you can choose who you become from this point forward. He straightened slightly, nodding. I'll testify if needed. I'll speak to the investigators. I'll tell the truth. Truth, the very thing my husband feared most. All right, I said, but this isn't about fixing me. I'm already fixing myself. This is about fixing you, about you learning who you are without his voice in your head. He blinked, stunned by the clarity of my words. I understand. My sister stepped aside to let him in, and for a moment the threshold felt symbolic. A doorway not just into the house, but into a new version of our family. A smaller one, a fractured one, but maybe in time a more honest one. The next week unfolded in a blur of legal filings, meetings, and statements. But for the first time, the chaos didn't swallow me whole. I navigated it with a strange, growing steadiness, a steadiness I had never known I possessed. My son kept his promise. He met with Marion, provided testimony, and handed over messages and emails that revealed more than I ever expected, including instructions from my husband telling him and my daughter not to question anything, to trust his judgment, to keep their mother calm and compliant. Reading those words was like swallowing ice, but it was also the final piece we needed. Marion compiled everything into a comprehensive case file. This is enough, she said. More than enough. He won't recover from this. My sister cooked dinner that night, humming softly in the kitchen while my son helped chop vegetables, an unfamiliar sight that both warmed and pained me. I watched them from the table, feeling like a visitor in my own life, unsure how to belong in this new version of family. He really is trying, my sister whispered, catching my gaze. I know, I said, but trust isn't automatic, it's earned. Later that evening, my phone rang, Marion again. Anna, she said, her voice tinged with something I couldn't place, urgency, yes, but also triumph. A hearing has been scheduled, tomorrow morning. So soon? I asked. Yes, because his petition relies on fabricated medical claims. And with the evaluator's report, the agency's testimony, your son's statement, the judge deemed it an emergency. Emergency. The word felt poetic, almost ironic. He tried to declare me incapable. Instead, the court declared the situation dangerous, but not because of me, because of him. Anna, Marion added, you need to be prepared. Tomorrow may be emotional. He may lash out. He may lie, but he cannot win, not with what we have. I nodded slowly. I'm ready. But when I hung up, a tremor ran through me, not fear, anticipation, the kind that comes before truth breaks open. My sister took my hand. He's losing, she whispered. No, I said softly, staring at the quiet house. He lost the moment I walked away. Tomorrow would not just be a hearing. It would be the end of the life I thought I had, and the beginning of the one I chose. The courthouse stood tall and austere, its stone columns casting long shadows across the steps. My sister held my arm as we walked inside, but my feet moved with unexpected certainty. I wasn't the helpless woman my husband expected to see. I wasn't the frightened wife who once shrank to fit the quiet corners of her own home. I was someone reborn through truth. Marion met us in the hallway, her expression composed, her eyes alight with determination. He's already here, she said, with his attorney. My stomach tightened. Is he alone? No, she answered. Your daughter chose not to come. Your son is here as your witness. The air left my lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. My son approached then, offering a tentative smile, small but sincere. I'm here, Mom, he said. I know, I replied. We entered the courtroom. My husband sat at the opposite table, arms crossed, jaw clenched. His eyes slid toward me, cold and assessing. But something flickered there, something I had never seen in him before. Doubt. The judge entered, and proceedings began quickly. His attorney spoke first, insisting I was confused, emotionally unstable, incapable of managing my affairs. He painted me as fragile, erratic, lost. Every lie he told slid like oil across the air. Marian's turn came. She stood with the calm of a woman armed with truth. Your Honor, she began, we will not rely on emotion today, we will rely on facts. She presented the psychological evaluation, the agency's testimony, the threatening messages, the forged refinancing attempt. The petition he filed claiming I was deteriorating without any valid diagnosis. She outlined his attempts to seize authority, to rewrite my reality, to erase my autonomy. Then she called my son to the stand. He spoke with a trembling voice but a steady heart. He admitted his mistakes. He acknowledged his father's manipulation. He described the tactics used to pressure me, the lies they were told, the way my husband framed every decision as for my own good. My husband glared at him, betrayal twisting his face into something almost unrecognizable. When my son stepped down, the courtroom fell silent. Finally, the judge turned to me. Mrs. Hale, he said gently, is there anything you wish to say? I rose slowly, gripping the edge of the table. Yes, I said, and for the first time in decades, my voice filled the room without permission, without apology, without fear. I stood tall, the whole courtroom watching, the weight of my life balanced in my breath. For years, I began, I believed that being quiet made me strong. That sacrifice meant love. That endurance was a virtue. My voice wavered, not from fear, but from the power of speaking aloud what had been buried. I pretended to be sick because I felt invisible in my own home. I wanted to know if anyone still cared. My husband scoffed under his breath. I ignored him. What I learned, I continued, was not that my family didn't love me, but that love without respect becomes something poisonous, something that can be twisted, weaponized, used to make a person disappear without ever leaving the room. I turned toward my husband, meeting his cold stare with unwavering resolve. You built a story about me, a story where I was unstable, incompetent, fading. You told it so well that even our children believed it. You used the lie I whispered in desperation and turned it into a cage. My voice deepened. But here I am, not confused, not fragile, not fading. I faced the judge again. I am here because I chose to protect myself, because I chose truth. And because I will not allow anyone, not even the man I once trusted, to decide who I am or what I'm capable of. Silence filled the courtroom, thick and electrifying. My husband's attorney cleared his throat and attempted to salvage their crumbling narrative. Your Honor, this is emotional manipulation. The judge raised a hand. I have heard enough. A beat passed, then another. The tension coiled like a held breath. Based on the evidence, the judge said finally, Mrs. Hale is entirely competent. Her rights remain fully intact. The petition for power of attorney is denied. My heart pounded as the judge continued. Furthermore, due to the documented attempts at coercion and the fabrication of medical information, this court grants the protective injunction requested by the respondent. Protective injunction. Protection, from him, my husband's composure shattered. This is absurd, he snapped, rising to his feet. She's manipulating all of you. She's my wife, she is a free adult, the judge interrupted sharply, and she is no longer under your influence. As the gavel struck, the finality echoed through me like a liberation I had never dared dream of. My husband was escorted out, seething, defeated. I remained standing, trembling, yes, but triumphant. For the first time in a lifetime, I had won. When we left the courthouse, sunlight seemed brighter than it had in years. The air tasted different, not lighter, but cleaner, like the world itself had exhaled with me. My sister squeezed my hand. It's over, she whispered. No, I said softly, staring up at the vast sky. It's beginning. My son approached, his eyes earnest, humbled. Mom, I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to rebuild something with you, slowly, honestly. I studied him, really studied him. Not as the child I once protected, not as the man who had betrayed me, but as a human being trying to grow. We'll rebuild, I said, but brick by brick. He nodded, tears glistening. As we walked toward the car, my phone vibrated. A message, unknown number again. My breath caught for a moment, expecting another threat. Instead, it read, "Thank you for trusting me." Jenna, a smile touched my lips. Unexpected allies, unexpected endings. That evening, back at my sister's house, I sat in the garden where lavender swayed gently in the breeze. I thought of the home I had lost, not the physical structure, but the illusion of safety. I thought of the woman I had been, quiet, patient, shrinking to fit the spaces life gave me. And I realized something. I had pretended to be sick to test their love. But in doing so, I uncovered something far more important. I uncovered myself. The strength I thought I lacked. The voice I had buried. The courage I believed was gone. My daughter sent a message later that night. "Mom, when you're ready, can I talk to you too?" I replied simply, "Yes, when I'm ready." Because now I chose the timing, I chose the terms, I chose me. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of amber and rose, I felt a calm settle over me, not the fragile calm of denial, but the solid calm of truth. My life was no longer defined by what had been taken from me. It was defined by what I reclaimed. My autonomy, my dignity, my future. I breathed in the fading light and whispered to the woman I used to be, the one who once lived in shadows, "You're free now." And in the quiet rustle of evening, I swear, she whispered back,